Hey guys, so today I want to show you something that I've been working on in Unity. So right now I'm working on some projects in VR. I'm back in VR, and one of the things that I had to implement was gaze interaction. And to be honest, I think that gaze interaction in VR is not used so much right now because we have the controllers and everything. But I remember that at the time when people were using the Google Cardboard as the VR headset, when you put like the device and you had like that switch on the side, gaze interaction was something that was pretty common. Right now, it's not as much, but either way, I think it's still useful in terms of not only accessibility, but also people that don't know exactly how to work with VR. Um, it's easier for them to interact with objects if you have just gaze interaction. So basically, gaze interaction works in a way that you need to look at a certain object to interact with the object, to activate the object, enable it, or something like that. And you can also add a timer so that the user is able to select the object by keep looking at it for a certain amount of time. And so basically that's it. And let me show you. So basically the controller that I've created, I have this sample project. I imported the starter asset from Unity. That's why I have this environment. And I'm thinking about just to explain what I'm doing right now. Throughout all these years, I've been developing a lot of like, not tools, but functionalities for different projects, but I never had like the mindset of creating them in a way that we could easily use them in different projects, just like importing and exporting those tools or those features into a different project. And right now I'm going back to a lot of stuff that I've implemented throughout all these years, and I'm making them into like sample projects and with Unity packages and stuff like that we can just import into new projects. And I'm also going to start sharing them with you guys and also on GitHub. And so I'm going to show you at the end the GitHub page where you can download it. I'm also going to add it on the description below. And that's it. So that's the idea. And I don't remember exactly where I'm talking about this, but I think it was because I imported the starter assets, and just to justify, okay, probably I'm just going to be creating like sample projects and using the starter assets as a base to create the environments, so to import the actual features into it. So let me show you the example that I have here. So I have these two boxes over here. And the idea is just that when the player looks at one of the boxes with using the gaze interactor, when the player looks at one of the boxes just start moving. And this one on the left, it starts moving exactly the moment that when the player just looks at it, when the interactor detects the box. The one on the right only starts moving when it's activated, and being activated means that the player needs to look at the box for a certain amount of time, so to activate the box. So let me just show you how it works right now. Okay, so you can see here that I have this reticle, let's call it a reticle for the gaze, so you can see where I'm looking at. We have this reticle, and remember that I developed this for VR. I mean, if it was not VR, this would be a lot simpler because you can just create this reticle with a canvas on screen space. But in VR, you usually don't use screen space because you don't want like stuff to be like glued or stuck to the screen. It gives a really bad experience. So here I'm using a world space canvas. So let me just show you. Okay, here we have the object. Let me see where it's the reticle. So the reticle is over there right now. And for here, and you can see that the reticle is basically just following the object where we are colliding. You can see that on the top, the reticle just moving along when we are looking at the parts of the screen. And one thing that I had to also do, you can see that the reticle maintains the size. So basically, the reticle itself is scaling according to the distance where we are looking at it. So it keeps the size on screen no matter the distance from where we are looking from. And so you can see the reticle, you can see it here. So it's following almost everything. I also have like a max distance. So for example, you can see that if I look, you cannot see the reticle like pointing to the boxes on the background. but it has like a max distance that we can configure. I'm going to configure it, so I'm going to show you in just a bit. And then we have these two boxes. So now when I look at this box, you can see that it starts moving. This is like a demo script. And when I stop looking, it stops moving. And I have a delay here. This is because on this project I'm working on, we needed to have a delay because we are using this to highlight certain objects that we can interact with, and we didn't want, so when the player stopped looking at the object, we didn't want the object to lose the highlight immediately. So basically I implemented a delay, and then you can configure the time delay. So when you look at the object and you look away, the object can still retain the highlight or whatever for a few seconds before invoking the gaze exit event that I have configured. So here you can see that immediately activates the object. When I look away, the object stops moving. And the one on the right works in a similar way, but the difference is that we need to activate the behavior. So you can see that we have like a progress, like a circle, and only when the circle completes, the object is activated. And usually we want to have something like this, unless you want to have like effects like highlights and stuff like that. So for example, I'm using these two events combined. So I'm using, when I look at a certain object, it highlights the object immediately, but then the player needs to keep looking at the object to actually interact with it after a few seconds. So this is basically so that the player does not interact with an object by accident, just like, because if we don't have like this activating event or this delay when interacting with the object, the player, as soon as the player looks at some object, it would activate it immediately, and that's not a very good user experience, unless you just want to like show that the object is interactable. Then it makes sense to be immediately activated. So here you can see that it's immediately activated, and here you need to wait for a few seconds, and then it's activated. And when you look away, it stops immediately. So you can see that here I just removed the delay when we stop looking at the object. So it's moving. As soon as I stop looking at it, it just stopped right away. And this is it. Like I said, it's a really simple implementation, and let me just show you how you can use it. So on the GitHub repository, you have like this sample project where you can see how everything is set up, but it's really simple. So basically what you need to do is, inside the main camera that you are using, and in this case, once again, I'm using this first person controller, but if you are in VR, you just need to add the gaze interactor as a child to the main camera that you have on your XR rig or whatever you are using for the VR rig. So here you can see that I added the gaze interactor as a child of the main camera, and basically we have two main components in this implementation. So let me show you here: gaze interaction, scripts. We only have like these 4 scripts. So we have two main components. We have the gaze interactor and the gaze interactable. And I went a little bit like I'm using the XR interaction toolkit, and I went a little bit with the same approach that they use. So they have like interactors and interactables, and I'm using exactly the same here. So I have a gaze interactable and a gaze interactor. The interactor is the one that sends a raycast to detect where we are looking at, and the interactable is the one that is actually invoked or activated by the interactor. So, sorry, but my dogs just woke up, but yeah, and they just stopped. So the gaze interactor is the one that goes as a child of the camera. So that is aligned with the camera, so you need to set it as a child and on the center, centered with the camera. And then you have like these options. So you can configure the max distance that you can detect objects. So you can see that here I am detecting objects at a max distance of 10 units, and you can configure that here. So you can see that the array that I have there is showing you how far you can interact with an object with your gaze. So I'm using 10 here. I also had like a mean detection distance, which means that if you are really close to an object, then you won't detect that object with the gaze interactor. Here I have like 0.1 because I'm not actually using it, and I think I'm not actually changing it in the right. No, I need to change this so that it's easier to understand what the mean is also doing. And then you have the time to activate objects. So you can configure here how much time you need to wait. So this is the time that the circle takes to complete to activate the object. So here, for example, I'm using 3 seconds, and you can configure here. And my idea at the time that I implemented this was also to maybe add like an override for this option on each gaze interactable. So for example, imagine that by default, all objects are activated using a 3-second delay. So you need to look at an object for 3 seconds to activate that object. But let's say, for example, that I have a specific object on the screen that I need to look at it for a higher amount of time or a lower amount of time. So probably we could add another setting on the gaze interactable that would override this one. But I don't have that right now. I didn't need it to, but that's something on my mind to probably implement. And you also have a layer mask. So the layer mask basically tells you what kind of objects the raycast that I'm using on the interactor will detect. Right now I'm using the default, but you can also create, for example, a specific layer for the interaction. And I'm just going to show you this in a bit. And then so you have this prefab with the gaze interactor, basically, that you put inside the main camera. And then you have the gaze interactable. And the gaze interactable, you also have a prefab, and basically it has the script gaze interactable and a collider. So the collider is needed so that the raycast is able to detect this object. And the gaze interactable, you have two options in the configuration. So you can say that if this object is activable or not, which means that if it's not activable, then the activated event will never be called, and you usually end up using the gaze enter. And when you have the activable, that's when your gaze activated is used. And you also have the exit delay. The exit delay is the amount of time that it takes when you stop looking at the object, the amount of time that it takes for the object to detect that you are no longer looking at it. That's why when we were looking at this cube and we stopped looking at it, it took like 1 second to stop moving. That's the amount of time that it will take for me to call this gaze exit event. And so, for example, in the other one, this one is activable, so that's why we have the progress bar on this one, and the exit wait was like 0.1 seconds. That's why it was almost immediate. And we have all these public events on the gaze interactable. So when the gaze enter, on gaze enter, when we start looking at the object, on gaze stay, and this is called in a loop. So as long as we are looking at the object, this event keeps getting called. On gaze exit, when we stop looking at the object. On gaze activated, so when an object is activable and after the delay that we configured here on the time to activate, this event is called. And on gaze toggle, so this passes a Boolean value so that, for example, you can enable and disable objects without having to use the gaze enter and gaze exit. For example, I added this one because I was using a highlight effect, and the highlight effect had a property like is highlighted or not. And instead of using gaze enter and gaze exit to enable the highlight and disable the highlight, I created a new event that just passes a Boolean value, and I can use it directly on a property. So I could use it, for example, to activate, and we could use it, for example, to toggle an object, to activate, deactivate the object, stuff like that. So these are the events that I have at the moment, at least. And then in terms of scripts, I also have this gaze reticle, which is here on the resources. This is loaded at runtime, so you can see that you don't need to place the gaze reticle anywhere. So the gaze interactor just loads the gaze reticle at runtime using the resources manager. And this resources manager is just like a common. Let me show you, like a common script that I use when I'm loading resources at runtime. It's pretty simple, but I added it because I think that maybe we can add some things later. Like, for example, you can add a sound effect when you enter an object, when you detect an object, or when you exit an object, when you activate an object. We could create something like that, and we could have the audio also as resources. So you can see it just loads the prefab. And let me show you the other scripts. And as I was saying, we have the gaze reticle. So the reticle, basically, it just have methods to position the reticle on the where we are detecting the object. And let me show you also here on the prefab the options. So I'm using a world space canvas, as you can see here. It has a circle which is always visible, and the image progress is the one that we use when we are activating the object. And also as a configuration properties, we have the scale, and this is the mean scale that the reticle can have. So when we are scaling the reticle in terms of the distance to the object, the reticle scale will never be below this scale, which is like the initial scale that we are using. And it's also, no, I'm using 0.015, but it's 0.01, the one that I'm using here. And offset from hit. Okay, yeah, the offset from hit is when we are positioning the reticle on the hit point. So for example, that I'm setting a raycast that it's like colliding with a box collider in this point. Instead of placing the reticle exactly on that point, what I'm doing here is that I'm giving it an offset from that point, so in a way that I can move it forward from that point, so that it does not intersect with the collider or with the mesh, because sometimes the reticle would intersect and become not visible because it would be inside the other mesh. So I'm probably going to change this, because this doesn't work every time if the reticle is too big, and if you are looking at the object, and if you are interacting with the object from a funny angle, then the reticle will be looking at you and inside the box. So this doesn't work that well. So probably what I'll end up doing is using a shader that always renders the reticle on top of everything. It doesn't matter if it's like intersecting with the other object or not. It just render that reticle on top of everything else. But I haven't added yet, so this offset from hit does that job for now. And let me see. So yeah, so this is the code for the reticle. In terms of the interactor, let me just show you a little bit so you can see all the options that I have here. And basically what the Interactable is doing is on update is sending a raycast, creating array, it's sending a raycast, and it's just like detecting. So if it's within the distance, if it's not within distance, then we don't care about what we are detecting. Otherwise we show the reticle, then we can have an interactable or not, and stuff like that. So, and then I'm invoking all the methods on the interactable. So gaze stay, gaze enter, and gaze exit is somewhere. Oh, it's here. Yeah, on the reset. And so I'm not going over all the code, so you can just check the repo and check the code if you want. And this is it. I mean, so far, at least this was what I needed for the project. Probably we can extend this to become a little bit more flexible. But for now, this works as I expected. One thing that I also did was, for example, right now the reticle is always visible, but we might want the reticle to only be visible when we are actually looking at interactables. So one way that we can do that is on the layer. For example, we could just say that the interactor will only detect objects on the layer mask gaze, and then we just place all our gaze interactables in the layer gaze. And if we do something like this, then you see that the reticle will not appear when we are looking at the environment, only appears when we actually look at the object. And we might want something like this, so the reticle is not always present, but when we look at something, and I'm imagining that this might not be very good experience, but for example, imagine that you have like a panel with different objects or with different buttons or objects that you need to interact with, and when you look at the panel, then the reticle appears, and when you are looking around in the panel, you have a reticle. When you are looking at the rest of the environment, then you don't need the reticle anymore, and you don't show it. So we could have something like that. So you can see that here appears again, it disappears, and appears again. It's also like a little bit more flexible than just like being present all the time. And I'm also not sure if I should like hide the reticle when we activate the object or not, because then the reticle is on top of the object. There's also probably one option that we can add, but we'll see. And yeah, so this is a project, and like I said, let me just show you here. Like I said, where is it? Yeah, this one. So this is on the GitHub. This is on my GitHub profile, Unity Gaze Interaction. I also created a release with a Unity package that you can just download the package. If you don't want to have the whole project, you can just download the package to implement this in your own project. And the package is basically only this folder. So the starter assets and the demo don't go in the package. So this is only what you need to actually implement the gaze interaction in your project. So I created this release with the Unity package that you need. And yeah, I mean, and this is it. And like I said at the beginning, it's a really simple project. It's quite simple implementation, but that was something that I needed, and probably it might help you in your own projects if you are like working with VR, or even if you are not working with VR. It also works with an FPS controller, as you saw. It's not the best implementation for that case, but it also works. So I hope you guys like it, and I don't know. This is it. So I'll see you on the next one. Thanks.